Updating you on our breaking news, DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin now threatening fines and prison times for state officials who don't cooperate with DHS on purging non-citizens from their voter rolls. That is despite DHS has not provided any evidence of their claims. Joining me now, Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He sits on the Judiciary and Foreign Relations Committees. I am taken, Senator, by the fact that it is less than 24 hours since the president delivered that speech, and already Markwayne Mullin is operationalizing this administration's agenda.
That's right, Alicia. Look, we're seeing a full-on assault on our federal elections. President Trump last night in an Oval Office speech didn't talk about rising costs, didn't talk about the ongoing war with Iran. He rehashed what are now 6-year-old conspiracy theories, classified information that's already been released, things that happened when he was president and the people he chose led our intelligence community, and delivered no new concrete evidence to prove that there was any impact on the 2020 elections. Alicia, you know well, and your viewers know well, that President Trump and his supporters went to court over and over and over in 2021 trying to prove that there was fraud in the 2020 elections. They failed in every single federal court case. And for Markwayne Mullin, the Secretary of Homeland Security, to now be threatening criminal sanctions for those who won't purge illegals out of our voter rolls is just another step in undermining confidence in our elections. President Trump has over and over said he can only lose if the election is rigged. That's not true. In fact, the only person we know interfered in the 2020 election was President Trump himself when he picked up the phone and called Georgia's Secretary of State, the man in charge of elections, and said, "Go find me the votes that will let me win Georgia." I trust the American people and our election system. Yes, there are challenges and vulnerabilities, and the way we deal with them is by investing in the state, county, and local infrastructure of elections, not by spreading more falsehoods and lies, not by giving a primetime address littered with sinister innuendo, but no new concrete facts.
Well, to your point about how this may have to be a state and local effort, Delaware has been the target of DOJ attempts to seize voter rolls. Your governor created a task force essentially to Trump-proof your elections. Can you give us a sense of the conversations that are happening between federal and state leaders right now?
I have great confidence in our Attorney General, Kathy Jennings, and our Governor, Matt Meyer. They are clear-eyed about the potential threats to election security and integrity. The Constitution provides for states to conduct elections, not the federal government. In fact, there's a law on the books that goes back to the 1800s saying you can't deploy federal troops to polling places because it was done before. And when President Trump casually mentions that he's going to direct the Postal Service not to deliver mailed-in ballots, that he may deploy ICE agents to polling places, he's broadcasting his intent to use federal resources to interfere with elections. And in Delaware, we have confidence in the integrity and transparency of our elections. They are well-run, they are state-run, and that's the way it should stay.
Senator, I want to turn your attention to the confirmation of acting AG Todd Blanche, who I think is actually very relevant in the conversation we're having about the upcoming elections. Fundamentally, do you think Tillis or Cornyn hold the line?
I don't know. I am grateful that Senator Tillis demanded he actually meet with the victims of Epstein, something that hadn't happened before. And I am hopeful that the issues that they raised, Senator Cornyn pressed some hard questions about the weaponization fund that is not dead yet. And Senator Tillis raised hard questions about accountability for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. But I've been disappointed over and over by colleagues who have raised hard questions about unqualified nominees from Tulsi Gabbard to RFK Jr., but in the end voted for them. So I'm not going to hold my breath on that. I do think it's important that folks realize the answer to the question that I asked him, Mr. Blanche, why are you here? He's there because Pam Bondi, who was his predecessor as Attorney General, was fired by Trump for not successfully prosecuting his perceived political enemies. President Trump said on Truth Social that Pam Bondi needed to get going indicting people like Jim Comey and the Attorney General of New York, Tish James. And it was only because a grand jury of average citizens refused to return indictments that it didn't happen. Todd Blanche sees himself and has previously been President Trump's personal defense attorney. That's not the role of the Attorney General. He needs to stand up to Trump. He needs to stand up for the truth. And he needs to not continue this campaign of weaponization that Trump's been on. And it'll have real consequences in our November elections if Todd Blanche continues to go in this direction. The acting director of national intelligence, Bill Pulte, someone with zero intelligence experience, is also an alarming interim placeholder because of his potential misuse of classified materials and intelligence. Look, it's long past time, Alicia, for my Republican colleagues who care about democracy, who believe in our Constitution, to stand up to some of Trump's spreading of conspiracy theories and, frankly, bald-faced lies, and protect and preserve the Constitution of our nation.
You mentioned Bill Pulte, so I'm going to ask you about Jay Clayton, the nominee to be the director of national intelligence. He sat for his confirmation hearing on Wednesday, arguably the luckiest guy in the world because so many eyes were on Blanche. Back in June, you told NPR that while he's, quote, not as obviously awful as acting DNI Bill Pulte, Clayton still lacks the intelligence background that is required. How do you plan to vote on his nomination?
I will vote against Jay Clayton to be Director of National Intelligence. I think it's frankly humiliating that so many senior nominees, whether to be a federal district court judge or Director of National Intelligence, can't just look in the camera and say, yes, Joe Biden won the 2020 election, frankly, by 7 million votes. And his refusal to answer several senators' questions about the outcome of the 2020 election and his conduct in issuing subpoenas against New York Times reporters in recent weeks, both raised real concerns for me.
Not as obviously awful. I have to tell you, that is an endorsement I never hoped for myself. Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. Senator, thank you.
Thank you, Alicia.